Hey everyone, Harold Fisher here, anchor and host of the Daily Drum on WHUR. Welcome to another edition of HUR at Home Newsmakers on WHUR.com and all of our social media platforms. Next month, WHUR will celebrate 50 years on the air, and that includes signature programming like the Daily Drum. Well, this month on HUR at Home Newsmakers, I'll be talking to some of the people who have helped make it what it is. Joining me on the program tonight are former reporter Troy Johnson, now TV news anchor and reporter at WAPT TV in Jackson, Mississippi, former WHUR news reporter and public affairs assistant TERIA Rogers, and WHUR news reporter BREMANTE BRYANT. Hey, the gang is all here. Hey, everybody.
What's up?
Hello.
Thank you all so much for joining this conversation. It is WHUR News Homecoming, and I want to start off because we all know each other in various ways and have all had some really important contributions to the Daily Drum and to WHUR as a whole. And to be quite honest, I am connected to each of you in one way or another. So I'll start off with you, TERIA. How did you first come to WHUR, and what would you describe as your strongest memory of working there?
So when I came to the station, I was kind of fresh grad school graduate from the communication school at University of Southern California. It was coming back home. I got in touch with Tracy Luttrell, who was still there, was one of my good colleagues from a prior job. She said, Renee is looking for somebody to work in her department. And I was so lucky to get hired by Renee, who I think is like one of the most amazing radio personality people we have in the Washington, D.C. area of all time, honestly. And work with her in the public affairs. And it's kind of this weird position because we're supporting community events, but also supporting like the news department. So it kind of went both ways. So we're doing events in the community with reporters, things of that nature. Then also some news may happen. We're covering those things, try to get it on the air. So we did, I kind of try to support both in those areas. And then one really significant memory I have is that 2007, telling my age, 2007, presidential campaign starts. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Edwards. And one of the first presidential debates they had was at Howard University. So Renee and I went there to cover that. And it's so interesting because when it was over, it was like Barack who? He was just, he was the new guy. He was really, really not good. And I was like, Renee, Hillary Clinton has this. And Renee said, Barack is the candidate. What are you talking about? And she just had that insight very early on. So that's one of my most important memories I have from the station.
Same question for you, BREMANTE. How did you come in? And what was your most significant memory of working? And you're still there, but
yes, well, like many people, especially in the business, oftentimes it's just relationships, connections, and sometimes those connections come about in unexpected ways. My kids were very little, and they were in a swim class, right? And so I was sitting there with my wife, and they were, swimming, and former news reporter Taylor Thomas that actually went to the University of Maryland at the same time as my wife. And my wife saw Taylor, and I think Taylor actually was there with Molette. And my wife was just saying, oh, my husband, he's in the business too. And he just moved back here. He's probably looking around. And they said, oh, you should contact Renee Nash. I think she's looking for people. And I think I came in and I talked to Renee, and I might have talked to Molette too. And I think they were looking for a producer. And, I said, well, my experience has been on air, and I was in television, not really as a radio person. So nothing ended up coming of that. And then one day, I don't know, it might have been 6 or 7 months later, again, the wife is in the post office and Millette sees her and she's leaving and Millette is banging on the window. She says, "Hey, aren't you Bremante's wife? Tell him that, Renee is still looking for someone." And then next thing you know, poof, I come in and I start reporting. I start filling in here and there for Harold, doing some stuff in the morning and doing some reporting. But one of my earliest memories, I think the first story I covered was Wayne Curry's funeral. And, that was interesting. Having grown up in Prince George's County, I knew the backstory, of Wayne Curry and first African-American county executive. And as you know, Harold, also growing up in the area, that was monumental because people who aren't from this area don't realize what Prince George's County really used to be like. It's not like it is now. But very quickly, beyond that, I would say my strongest first memory was, I think, not long after that, Mayor Berry passed away. And I covered that funeral at the convention center with Renee. And, that was just a big story. And so all of the speakers and everything that was going on there. And I had folks calling me saying, "Oh, I heard you on HUR. I heard you on the funeral," because we were doing updates, like every 10 or 15 minutes. And so that was just a big story just in general. And to be part of that and the role that WHUR plays on stories like that. And for me to be kind of freshly minted HUR reporter, even being able to do that story, I'll always remember that. And then there's obviously plenty of stories after that. But that I would say was my most memorable early indoctrination to WHUR as an employee and a reporter here.
And Troy, how did you come on and your best memory?
Well, my experience is a little different from everyone else because I initially came to WHUR as an air personality. So, Mark Clark and I did a show that we kind of conceived and put together called the Hang Suite. Tracy Luttrell hired us for that show. And, most of my radio career had been as an air personality. But I had some interest in news just kind of as the next step as my career evolved. And the opportunity came about for me to join the news department and also do Talk Around Town on NBC4 for WHUR. And, as TERIA mentioned, Renee, that's my girl. I love Renee Nash. She is just an incredible news person, incredible journalist. And she has some vision. She sees, some things that maybe others don't see. So it kind of was a perfect scenario for me because it helped me make this transition into television, but still allowed me to work at WHUR. I kind of I think I have a moment in WHUR history that nobody else has. I think I am the only person who has ever done the Daily Drum and the Quiet Storm in the same week, at least.
That's probably true.
It's probably true.
That's probably true.
So, I like to throw that out there because WHUR means an awful lot to all of us, whether it's on the programming side, all of the music and all of the things that the station represents in that way. And then obviously in the news department, because, we're sharing news for a community that oftentimes in many communities, their voices are not heard. The stories that are important to them are not told. And we really, at WHUR had the opportunity, because it's still there, have the opportunity to tell those stories. And it's informed me, even the way I approach things as a news anchor, as a television news anchor now in a city like Jackson, Mississippi, which, obviously a large African-American population, similar to Washington, D.C. in that regard. There's so many stories that need to be told. So I learned a lot in that time, in that 8-9 years at WHUR. Most significant story, I think the things that I kind of remember were election nights. They were always hectic. we were, posted up at every location, whether it was a mayoral race, if it was a primary, there might be 5, 6, 10, 93 candidates. We were going to be at all of those places. And I remember it had to be Marion Barry's last. No, it was Muriel Bowser's when she won the primary, and I had a chance to talk to Marion Barry that evening. He was there supporting her, and ultimately that was one of the last few appearances that he made, before he passed away. I also remember the 2016 presidential election and covering the Maryland Republican Party's watch party. A very interesting place to be, a place that, we were certainly there covering it. And I walked into a room that they didn't have any snacks. They had a couple of screens. They did not plan for a big celebration. And obviously things certainly took a turn that evening. It turned out to be a very interesting place to be when we found out it was the election of President Donald Trump.
Yeah. Briefly, and I'll start with TERIA again. You worked in public affairs, and that was really boots on the ground, ear to the ground as it relates to doing community/news stuff. What, from your perspective, what did the news department mean, and still from your perspective, still mean to the community?
I definitely piggybacking on what Troy said, WHUR, and again, I'm a Prince George's native as well, right? So I've always heard the brand of WHUR. Then you get inside and it feels like a family, but then that family feeling is definitely extended to the community, right? So we're going places, if we're at local coffee shops doing conversations, elections, things of that nature. People are always so willing to come up and share information with us, right? We're always in touch with them in the right places in the right time. It was like veterans or something, for families, young children, moms, whatever it is, we're always there for them. And they're always very much so there to help support us and share with us whatever they need, and being from the area and having worked in many outlets in many places over time, just understanding how important it is to have that community connection. And WHUR does an amazing job of staying in touch with the community.
Your thoughts about that, Bryante?
Well, I think in similar fashion, I think when you are from a area such that we're from, except Troy, from the DMV, and growing up listening to WHUR, right? I remember the first time that I met Patrick Ellis. I think I was working on the weekend, and I actually was going, past the studio, and I stopped, right? And I was watching him, but I was listening to him. And I am telling you, Harold, it was the most amazing thing, because growing up in this area, I would always hear that, right? On the radio, you would hear it in your house. And now when I got to HUR, I had already been in the business, 25 years. And so, there's not a whole lot that will stun you and kind of sort of make you step back. That was one of those moments. So I kind of wanted to share that. But in terms of the news division and WHUR and what we do on the Daily Drum, like all of you, having worked for me all along the East Coast, right? From Buffalo up New York, freelancing in Chicago. So some of these major markets, and to come back home into Washington, D.C., a major market. And again, not having worked at a place like WHUR where the mission is very focused, right? We still have to do the who, what, where, when, and how. But to Renee's credit, she would always say, everybody can do those same stories. If we do it, we've got to put another angle to it, knowing what our audience is, right? And so for me, that's very impactful to remember that. And I think, one of the greatest things for me is that when folks come up to me, and especially with my name that's just out there, if I introduce myself, then they'll go, wait a minute, I don't know anybody else by that name. And then they go, hey, aren't you on WHUR? Love that station. So to be connected to Howard University and having grown up in the area, but not having gone to Howard, went to University of Maryland, to me, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. You know, I grew up in Maryland, but Prince George's County, went to a state school, but yet I work at Howard University. I work in news and represent WHUR, and trying to cover the community in the way that we do. I've learned so much having come in with a certain amount of experience, but you realize there's still so much more you can learn. And that's really been the greatest impacts, I think, that I've sort of encompassed working at WHUR and Howard University in total.
Well, I would say, for me, the thing that, and it's kind of ironic because my first experience with WHUR working was in 1987. That was the second job out of college for me. And so Jim Watkins hired me in 87 and then rehired me in 2007, 20 years later. And I think that's, I am still fascinated by that.
I never knew that, Harold.
Yeah. I was here from 87 to 88. I was really young. I was 23 years old when I was hired. And then, I left here, went into the Foreign Service, and then went into television. But when I came back, and here's the thing that, that even then, and coming back, we were still just doing just some very, very powerful things. And just to kind of backtrack, that even back from 87 to 88, I mean, we were on Capitol Hill, and I was covering Prince George's and Montgomery County. I was covering Paris Glendenning and Sidney Kramer, who was the county executive in Montgomery County, and then Neil Potter, who was the county executive in Montgomery County, and the tax revolt there, and all kinds of interesting things that were happening back then. But then I was hired in 2007 on a Wednesday, and here comes that name again. Renee Nash comes to me on Thursday and says that there's going to be a protest next week in Gina, Louisiana. Can you go to Louisiana on Saturday? And I said, sure. And because I mean, what else do I have to do? And so, to have the ability, I've done more things here and done more traveling here than I ever did in television. And to have those kinds of experiences and have the opportunity to bring those things to our listeners, not just information, but the full depth and breadth of the experience. You can't buy that kind of experience. Not only you can't buy that kind of experience unless you watch network television, but you can't buy that kind of experience on any other Black news operation.
And I would say too, Harold, very quickly, and the opportunity that we, especially through the Daily Drum, to be able to, as a journalist, to talk about issues that all of us, I'm sure, know, having worked in various outlets, that we can't really expound on in the way that we can do at WHUR. There are some parameters, but just to have that freedom to be able to, we want to be as objective as possible, but we all know there is always some subjectivity in journalism. But to be able to do that, and Troy, if I could piggyback just real quickly on what you said about Talk Around Town, Renee, promoted me to go on Reporters Roundtable. And for me, that was just so liberating to even be able to be in that position to talk about issues that I know were germane to WHUR and to our community, to still use those TV skills that, I had, but also represent the station and Howard University, but to really be able to expound on issues beyond that you kind of can't do just as a traditional journalist. So it just goes so far beyond just the walls of 529 Bryant Street, right? Remember what I just said, Bryant Street? And so I just think that is so powerful too, that it's just, it spreads beyond just the airwaves of the radio station and how we represent that radio station in terms of what we do and get to talk about.
And can I jump in on that? Because remember, Black Lives Matter just happened 2019, 2020, right? So you're talking about 48 years of WHUR being able to present that information before it really exploded. And you have all these other outlets really have these conversations in depth, So it just goes to show the importance of Black Lives Matter is not new, right? So the value of a WHUR in a community talking about all these issues for all these years and really speaking, like Renee will say, knowing who your listeners are and speaking to them.
Well, we could talk about this all night, but we're not going to. but I certainly, I want to thank all of you for, taking the time, because Troy, I know you're working and I'm still working. And TERIA, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us. It's good to see you, sis. And, please stay in touch, Bryamante. I'm sure I'll be running into you soon.
Yes, sir.
Did we give Renee enough flowers tonight?
I know.
I know, right?
But she deserves.
Facebook Live, put her flowers.
She deserves every petal we can give her.
Put the flowers in the chat for Renee Nash.
So I've got to talk to you because my daughter's going to USC.
Really?
Yeah.
Trojans. All right, for sure.
Yeah. So we
just get you to get on the HBCU train to save our lives.
I have one left.
There's still hope.
Time for an intervention.
That's right.
Yeah, let's punch Brymante's black card. Bryante Bryant, TERIA Rogers, Troy Johnson, thank you all so much. Be safe. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you. See you guys.
Thank you, Harold.
See you, y'all.
All right, that is it for this edition of HUR at Home Newsmakers. I'm Harold Fisher. As always, I'll see you on the radio.